listening to REIA Radio, the nationally trusted name in real estate investing. We dig deep to discover investors' why in real estate. If you want to skip all the BS and get in investors' heads, you're in the right spot. Be one of the thousands to check out REIARadio.com.
The eye-opening thing for me was that when the market cycle changes, if you're playing the game, you got to have all new cards. And because that deal that was working is not working anymore, and something else is in its place. I had a very good mentor, and I learned how to do hard money lending from him, like how to raise capital and then kind of, lend it out at higher, in the arbitrage, whatever, right? And the statement that I make is he was responsible for me moving 3 feet from one side of the lending table to the other side of the lending table. And that was like how to make loans safe. That is a whole different mindset in itself.
This episode is brought to you by JM Real Estate Capital.
Hi, it's Rob, JM Real Estate Capital. We're the money guys that you need to know for all your real estate investments. Talk to us. We can do what your local bank can't or won't do. We don't have millions, we have trillions with a T to lend. 844 we close, or go online, jmrecapital.com. That's jmrecapital.com. JM Real Estate Capital, smart solutions for the real estate investor.
Welcome to REIA Radio, episode 183 with Tapan Trivedi.
The man, the myth, the legend. Tapan, I've got the first question for you. What do you think makes a comedian great versus just average?
It's when they constantly push themselves to write more and produce more. So I met Carlin for a good hour and a half in Houston, Texas, where all of us comedians went, and they were like, okay, he'll say yes. So we all sat on the side, and we were amazed to figure out that he was like 80 at that point.
George Carlin, right?
George Carlin. And
yep.
He was still writing 2 hours a day. The amount of, it was like just doodle, whatever it is. And it was like sometimes I write 2 hours and I realize that there's not even a minute's worth of material in it. But that level of creation, that's what separates. Joe, if you're talking about Joe, at one point he had this one act that he did for the long time. And then he said, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to force myself to do new stuff. And then kind of came up. So,
yeah, I guess I maybe assumed that people in that line of work would eventually get to a point where they had writers that wrote like all their jokes for them. But it sounds like, even George Carlin, who was a legend in the industry, he spent, creatively two hours a day. That's crazy. I guess I just assumed that was something you outsourced to somebody else and you're like, okay, new jokes.
There are comedians that hire big writers and stuff, right? But they will punch up and stuff like that. They will never come up with a lot of premises for them. I don't know if you know who Hasan Minhaj is. He had this show on Netflix called Patriot Act with Hasan Minhaj. He's one of my friends, and he did that show. And all the jokes that he did about topics, he came up. But then there's personal jokes that you may accept a punchline from somebody, but you're never going to accept a premise from somebody. So that makes sense.
Yeah, interesting. Out of the group that you worked with, were you on the East Coast for a while touring? Now you're based out of Sacramento, California. Did you kind of like geographically, where were you when you were doing the stand-up?
A lot of stand-up, I was still in Sacramento and doing it, but I was also in Texas. Texas and Sacramento are the two places. And then I did the LA stint for a while also. So
how long were you in that line of work?
I did it for 3.5 years, completely independently, like nothing else, but just that.
I just found it really interesting because I was looking a little bit through some notes on your background, and you're from India originally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I had a note here. You got an undergrad degree in civil engineering, like a good Indian son. Yeah. And if you're not going to be a doctor, I guess. And
the standard line on that is, I'm not a doctor. I just play one in the broken dreams of my parents.
Yep, that fits.
Every Indian girl that does not become a doctor can use that.
That's hilarious. Now, then you went on to get an MBA in management information systems. So you kind of double dipped, and is this to make up for the fact that you weren't a doctor?
Like I'm trying, I'm trying to make up with it.
So you got 2 degrees, and you worked for, it looks like, a number of years as a database administrator. You did that type of work for a variety of different companies.
It was officially one of the most boring jobs.
Yeah, because now my understanding, I was in IT recruiting for quite a while, so I worked for like IBM and recruited a lot of technology consultants. And one thing I noticed is there's a big difference between software engineers that do like front end development and people that work on database work, which is kind of the back end stuff. Did you notice that, like working alongside people? I know it's
completely different personality sets. Developers, they are deadline oriented. All the database administrators or network administrators or system administrators, they are event oriented. When something happens, we're going to do something. And in coding, all the programmers and stuff, they are like, okay, this new thing needs to be created by this end, and we have a month, so we will do everything in the last 4 days. That's their mindset.
Oh, got it. Okay, yeah. So it's kind of like a writer, like, right? You have this deadline hanging over you. You're like, oh man, I got to crank out a chapter today, and that's funny. Now, what I was picturing with you was you're sitting in a room, it's cubicle world, and there's a whole bunch of other DBAs in there, and you're the funny one. You're like cracking jokes in the break room. The guys are like, oh yeah, tell that one joke or whatever. Is that how your comedy started? You just found you like to make people laugh, and then they were like, you should get in front of more people and maybe do some nightclubs and stuff like that. How did that even work? How do you break into the comedy?
The first time I ever did stand-up was, I used to be a TA at Texas Tech in Lubbock, Texas. And I could not fraternize with my students.
Oh,
right? Because of the school's rules and stuff. But then I graduated with my master's, and they graduated with their bachelor's, and we all ended up in Houston, Texas. And they were like, we're going to take you to a comedy club, and they put my name up on an open mic. And they put me up, and I smashed because 90% of the audience was my students, and it got into my head thinking, oh, I'm funny. So I went next Monday again and then the Houston Laugh Stop, and reality hit, like, oh yeah, I'm not funny, I'm just getting my...
Did you bomb then your second show?
I bombed 7 times. I kept on going back, reliving that same thing. But then the late great Ralphie May, he saw me and he was like, you got something out here. So, if you want to go do an actual show with me in Louisiana, which later on I realized he just wanted somebody to drive him there and back. But he gave me legit 5 minutes at a show, and he punched up my jokes on the way to Louisiana, and that's how I kind of got started. Yeah,
I started really. I love comedy shows, so I've been to I think 3 or 4 probably in the past year, which is a lot for me since I'm kind of a homebody. But we went to Anthony Jeselnik. I don't know if you follow his stuff. Really dark humor, and I just find him absolutely hilarious. And he had a podcast for a little while where he'd have other comedians come on, and they would talk about kind of the how comedy works and how they think about jokes and like how he kind of puts everything together, because he's so different than a lot of other people's approach. And he was telling the story how he got up and his first time he killed, and then the next time he went out he just bombed. And so it's like this huge dichotomy with your confidence level. You think you're like on top of the world, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh man, I have imposter syndrome. I'm not good at this.
It's an ego boost from the first time is so huge that you keep on reliving that brings you back.
Of the different stand-up comics that you had the opportunity to work with, you mentioned Joe Rogan, you mentioned George Carlin. Of the ones that you maybe looked up to or really liked their work, who was maybe one of the more surprising people you met, and why?
So 2 people that I worked with that I absolutely adore. One was Robin Williams. I did a few shows with him. That was really, really mind-blowing because he was so chill. Oh,
really?
Stage.
I would not have expected that at all.
He was famously up and down in terms of, but he self-regulated through stand-up at times. So there are times that he would be like, okay, let's just go ahead and make somebody laugh and stuff. And that was just what happened to him. But as a person, he was very intelligent, and he can talk about almost any topic intelligently because he was a voracious reader. A lot of people don't know that about him. He's just always reading something or other. And like, notes and this and that and all. That's the other thing. The third thing, I don't know if you know who Doug Stanhope is.
I know that name.
I know that name too for some reason. Maybe I've caught it and didn't realize who it was.
They did the Man Show. Drew did the Man Show first.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Right.
definitely.
So when they both started doing their own thing, Jimmy got the Late Show and stuff. Joe Rogan and Doug Stanhope got the Man Show.
Yep, I remember that.
And
Okay,
that's
all right.
the guy. And he is one of it's somebody that I look up to in terms of how they create dark humor and stuff like that.
The Man Show should be brought back. That was fun. That was an amazing program. Let's watch more women jumping on trampolines. You mentioned that Robin was a big reader. I mean, over and over again, there's just so many telltale signs that anybody that has extreme success in whatever they do are just, vicious readers. They read nonstop. Everybody is uber successful. Can you guys vouch that they just have extreme success in whatever they're trying to succeed in?
I mean, I think so. There is kind of a difference, though, between being like a subject matter, total guru that knows everything inside and out. It's like, inch wide, mile deep. And then there's people that read like about a whole bunch of, like you mentioned with Robin Williams, like he's just worldly, right? He knows a lot about a lot in a wide range of topics. And I think the more narrow you get in your focus, the more it leads to just being considered an expert. It's kind of like the generalist versus the expert in it. But yeah, I mean, I can't poke holes in what you just said. The more you know, the probably more interesting you are to other people, right?
Yeah.
I can't think of anybody that I know that has been successful that has not been consistently reading at least a few books a year.
And I'm talking about physically reading. I'm not talking about like books on tape. I mean, otherwise I'd be incredibly intelligent. So it just proves that it doesn't work that way.
Ted. So database work for quite a while, slogging through that career. Stand-up comedy, went to Texas, traveling through the circuit in California. At what point did real estate enter your thought process or your world?
Read Rich Dad Poor Dad like a lot of people, and I'm like, okay. And that's the time that my daughter was born, so it was like, okay. It lights a whole different fire under you, but at the point, so like you think more of stability and stuff like that. Like, okay, if something happens to me, what and all. And it was also like, I need to really make sure that if something happens to me, like, I grew up in a third world. My dad didn't leave pretty much. He left a apartment and all those things and stuff like that for us and stuff, but different upbringing. And I'm like, if that's the same for me and him both, then what's the difference in me coming all the way here and doing all these things and stuff? So it's like, okay, let's focus on wealth. And apparently it's a science. So I'm like, okay, if it's a science, we can probably figure it out, and then we started learning the techniques and all. This was also 2009. So, it was easy to do real estate in 2009 in terms of deals.
Yeah, let's dig into that if you don't mind, because you and I started, sounds like in similar times. I was in 2005. I bought my first flip and rental, and then I was really active during the Great Financial Crisis. When you look at how things are right now, what do you think is more difficult and easier? Maybe compare and contrast like the two different cycles that we've been in over that period of time.
Here's the way I see it. Ours is a business of deals and dollars,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if it's up or down, there's never like this. It's not equal ever. Like 2009, when we started, things were all down. Supposedly, it was an absolute buyer's market. So it was really easy to create deals, but nobody would lend on real estate. So dollars were really hard to find. Right now, there's so much capital waiting around, but deals are kind of hard to find, right? So you have to work really hard to create deals. At that point, in 2009 at least, like the way I created deals was I went and made offers on 5 houses that I would like to buy, and we'll get all the 5 accepted. And then it's like, let me see which ones I can come up with the money for, and I'll let the other ones go.
I mean, I would totally agree with you. I remember I had, at the time, but right before the Great Financial Crisis, I think it was right before Obama took office, there was a first-time homebuyer tax credit that people got. It was like $7,500 or $8,000 or something like that, that a first-time homeowner could buy a property, and then they would get a tax credit, so essentially offsetting their down payment that they would need to put in. And if they're a first-time buyer and they're using like an FHA loan, that could wipe out most of their upfront costs. And it was a lot easier to sell when that program happened.
I used that to buy my first rental house.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
That went away at the same time that the market really started tanking and the banks started going under. And a lot of lending institutions just weren't lending. They were scared to death of mortgages on investment properties because that was displayed to the world as this is the reason why, the market's doing what it is. It's these risky, hedge funds that are putting these financial security instruments together and tanked everything.
All these products, the Alt A loans and all those things, remember?
Yeah, liar loans, and they started bundling a bunch of like crappy, liar loans together and made a security out of it. Started selling that to different government sovereign wealth funds. It was bananas.
It seems like we're both fans of The Big Short.
Yeah. Oh man, I love that book. He's my favorite author too. But I just think it's interesting. Matter of fact, we were talking yesterday. I was at this meetup coffee group, a small group, and one of the topics that came up, I might have even brought it up. I just think it would be really interesting, and maybe you could work on this for us, being your software guru that you are. I thought it would be really interesting if somebody created not a roadmap, but more like a chart that says if this exists in the market right now. So like, let's say it's high inflation. Like, let's say interest rates are really high, like they're, 10%, 12%, maybe even higher than that. And also like the economy in general is, going through a massive inflation spike because they did an injection of, quantitative easing or whatever. So I just always found it curious because it's like, how do you maximize what aspect of real estate investing you're doing to coincide with the market conditions to make sure that you're extracting as much profit as you can out of that? So like, rentals work really well. You can do the BRRRR strategy, refinance out, get your money back when interest rates are really low or maybe going downward, where it's much more difficult to do that. Like a lot of the BRRRR investors that Ted and I know just kind of completely dipped out a couple of years ago when rates started spiking. So I always found it interesting, like, do you go all in building new homes? Do you flip houses? Do you wholesale? Do you wholesale? All those different things. It's like, when is the right time to do that? And what are you kind of like wasting a lot of time on? I just thought it would be really interesting if there's something you could put a lot of economic indicators into and it'll spit out.
There isn't a software on that, but there's something like this exists right now. It's not a software, but the wheel of which portion of the market cycle we are on and what kind of deals work the best. There's a phenomenal investor out of San Bernardino, Riverside, called Bruce Norris. He has done a lot of work on the market cycles and which kind of deals work best in which market cycle and stuff. So I would highly recommend that you take a look at what he has created and all. It's basically, okay, now we are entering the first signs of slowing. That's when people are giving away land for free or almost free or whatever, and you can just option a lot of it. And if you sit on that for a while from that market cycle, so that there's every market cycle, every clunk of the wheel has a different deal that becomes a primary, that this is the deal that will work now.
I will for sure check that out because, here I was thinking I was, the only person out of 8 billion people that have ever thought of this. So this is kind of disappointing and exciting at the same time. I'm going to check that out. So Bruce Norris and market cycles and how to invest at various points in them. All right. Nice. Okay. That's a wrap. No, I'm kidding. Okay. So what was your first move? You talked about education. You learned kind of like what to do, how to do it. When did you put that into practice?
This kind of goes into one of your eventual questions, but I joined my local REIA and I found my first mentor, and he truly helped me a lot. Like, he went and looked at houses with me, like, you would do this. And I locked one deal, and it was about as short of a deal. It was like, I locked something that was a short sale for like $42,000. I had the money to buy it, and it was like a $5,000, some stuff that was needed to be done with it. I had zero experience doing any kind of construction in terms of, but it was easy understanding what needed to be done. And the after repair on that was somewhere around 100K. So you can't really go wrong on that. But I wishy-washy on that for like 3 meetings. So I would keep on going and like I'm still on that deal, and there's like, you haven't bought that deal yet.
You're still talking about it.
So he said, "Oh, is it this realtor?" And like, yeah, like, oh yeah, do something in a week or I'm buying it.
Oh, okay. So he gave you a deadline. Nice.
Yeah, gave me a deadline. And then, of course, I went and bought it in 3 days. And because all I had to do was go to the title company, write a check, and finish the paperwork. That's all it was left.
And this was a short sale deal?
It was a short sale deal. It was just a simple 2-1 in one of the hoods in Sacramento. And that's all it was. But when that happened finally, but that was the swift kick that I needed to get things going. And that put me in the success cycle, so to say. It's like, okay, hey, I'm in this success cycle now because I was also doing software engineering at the same time, right? Because it's like, okay, I still needed to pay the bills and all. But it's like, I cannot work for 6.5 months with what I made on my first flip. So it's like more of that, less of this.
Yeah, that's life-changing.
That's absolutely life-changing, yeah.
Wow. It's always interesting. And we've talked, Ted and I have talked about this on other episodes, but it's always funny to me because a lot of times you see people that are stuck in a career, and I was for 20 years. I had dissatisfaction with mine and eventually got into real estate investing as a side hustle and then left my jobby job to focus solely on that. But it's funny to me what you said there, because a lot of us that are in this business, right, real estate investing, you don't want somebody's thumb on you all the time. You're like, oh man, I just really want to get out of my job, have financial freedom, and I can do what I want. And then they always seek out accountability, and that's when actual things happen, right? Like to your point, you were stuck on analyzing and focusing on this one deal and weren't doing anything. And then the minute that somebody said, hey, do something or you're going to lose it because I'm going to buy it, then you bought it a week later. That's just so funny to me because you introduce accountability back into somebody's life, and then that's when all the activity happens, right?
Right. And that was the thing. It was like you have to take swift, decisive action on a consistent basis, right? Mm-hmm. And without that, things don't move forward. You can put as much as you want on your calendar or task list or all those things, right? But unless you're finishing tasks towards a particular purpose, and that's basically how you move things. I don't know. I meet a lot of up and coming investors and stuff, and they're like, okay, I'm an investor. I'm like, okay, have you done a deal? Like, no. Okay. So why would you do a deal? I was like, oh, but I don't want to invest in Chicago. I don't want to invest there and stuff like, but you can't afford anything locally. So what the heck are you talking about, man? It's just...
We both have ran our own REIAs, and that's a common conversation you have with new members that come in. Yes, I'm a real estate investor, but no, I haven't done anything yet. I'm hoping that if I hang out in this room for a year or two, I'll eventually get my first deal.
I know, it's like saying, like I'm a doctor just because you're interested in medicine. Like, no, you're not. You're actually not yet.
You cannot be a doctor just because you went to the waiting room. You're much sooner become a patient than a doctor. So.
There's a guy from JM Real Estate Capital that hangs out at always comes to our event. So Ram, do you know Ram has actually went to school to finish school to be a doctor?
I think he told. I did remember that.
But he's like, but I'm not a doctor because I've never taken a doctor job. I just did all the schooling, finished it, and he goes, he's ready to go. Could be a doctor. But he's a real estate investor.
Man, wouldn't that be the ultimate mic drop moment for your parents? If you're like, you're like, hey, mom, dad, guess what? You're just like, boom, I can do it, but I don't want to. And then you walk away. And you're like, I'm going to be a stand-up comic.
And he's Indian also, and he's like,
you wanted me to do, now it's my turn.
Oh, that's great. Okay, so this is super cool, and I've always admired Ted for taking the leap in buying the local REIA here in Omaha. Which what's Sacramento's population roughly?
The metro area is about 2.5 million. The city itself is somewhere around 550K.
Okay, so we've got in and around Omaha is about 1 million in the MSA here. So you're probably double plus our size. How many attendees usually go to those things there?
Depends. My REIA, when I ran it, so I ran the REIA for like 14 years. And we used to have, there are low meetings that we will have 40, 50, and then the highs one when we have some speaker that everybody knows about or whatever, they will go up to 150, 180.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was that like? How long were you going to that event before you said, hey, man, you ever be interested in selling this baby off to me? And like, how did that work? Like, how does that even work? How do you buy a REIA? And I'd like to hear both of you guys.
My mentor had a life thing happen to him. He got married at, let's just say, advanced age, and all of a sudden got a baby on the way. So he was like,
ooh, gross.
I can't keep doing this and this both. So he decided to move to a different city. He moved to San Diego. And he was like, okay, I've created this. So, I want somebody that will really take care of this to take it from me. So there were two people that he offered. The other person didn't want to do that. And I was all for it. I'm like, yeah, I'd love to do this because I'm basically, I like people, I like talking to people. I like that whole shebang, Yeah.
And now how long had you been going to that before that happened?
2.5 years, give or take. Yeah.
You mentioned about 6 months worth of pay off of one flip, your very first one. How many of those, or how many like deals had you had under your belt by the time that you ended up deciding to, get involved as the leader of the REIA?
So at one point I started hitting my stride. I was doing 3 to 5 deals a month. I was very happy doing that, but I could cash flow things at hard money.
Okay.
The formula at that point was flip 3 and keep 1 free. So that was a thing. But I had done nearly 55, 60 deals, give or take, by the time.
Yeah, that's not a small number. I didn't know if you'd just done like 2 or 3, and then all of a sudden you're like, hey dudes, I'm leading the REIA now, and they're like, what have you done?
Hey.
Hey, I'm not throwing shade at Ted, although
it's not even that. I mean, there were things that people bring up to me, and I'm like, I have no idea what you were even talking about. Apartment complexes were a whole new thing for me at that point. I had not done a single apartment complex. So they're like, what are the cap rates you are seeing? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm not seeing any cap rates because I'm not looking for them. And then we educated, so I'm like, okay, let's go ahead and bring somebody. And then we got somebody at the REIA to teach apartment complexes. I'm like, oh, this is good. Let's do this. And, started doing hard money lending, brought somebody that did trust deeds lending and stuff like that. It's I like learning about new techniques. Like, okay, this is a thing too. This is a thing too. This is a thing too, So
I got lucky because I was an investment real estate agent for about 5 years and attending events. So, although I didn't own any apartment buildings going into it, I only had 2 investment properties by the time I took over the REIA. But I at least could answer some questions. I knew a lot of information, but I definitely had imposter syndrome.
You still do.
I do. But I pulled these guys on the side, and I'm like, how am I going to get in front of you guys and talk about real estate when I look up to all these guys in the circle that we were all attending the group, and they're like, you're fine, just get out there and have fun. But it was really intimidating.
Well, I think there's a misconception though. It's like you're essentially the conduit for a community. You're the guy that's bringing people together.
Well, I figured that out as time went.
Yeah. That they don't. I mean, nobody really cares or judges you as long as you're the one that's putting on.
Here's the thing. I was afraid of the people that have been coming and had a lot more experience than me, but you are bringing community to them. You are bringing updates to them, like legal updates. You probably do that. If the new rental laws are coming up, you'll bring a lawyer in and stuff, right? All those things, you are bringing it to them, and they're not going to go ahead and they would rather go ahead and attend one meeting and learn most of the broader points that this is coming your way, rather than paying an actual lawyer and doing a consultation or something. So we are bringing value to those guys also. So
it's not what I know. It's, what other people know. And I bring those people in front of the people, and then I'm learning with it. It's kind of like the podcast. I learned so much just sitting here and listening.
What's funny is I was just thinking of, you ever hear like you'll see reels or something where there'll be like women that'll be like crazy attractive, right? They're like beautiful, gorgeous women, and they'll be like, nobody ever comes and talks to me because men are intimidated by really beautiful women and they think they don't have a shot because they're, they have imposter syndrome or they don't think they're good looking enough or successful enough. And it's kind of similar to what, you see some like old dudes at real estate events like that where nobody is approaching them at all. And they're like, I just want to talk to you, like share my knowledge. Like, it's like you're the hot girl sitting in back and nobody will talk to you.
I have one investor friend. He's like that. He's just curmudgeonly cranky, the whole thing. But I encourage everybody to go and talk to him, because once he gets to talking, you're like, one of the things that he bitches about. And he bitches about the fact that he paid like $1,000 more, like 55 years back, while he was buying real estate in Marin County. Marin County hasn't built anything in like 45 years. So if you own anything out there, the only thing that it's doing is up. So all those houses that he's talking about that I paid $1,000 more are worth at least $4.5 million or more. But he's still like, I should have paid that $1,000 more to him. And I'm like, man, what are you even talking about?
Oh, that's so funny. No, I thought I heard you say kind of in passing there that you were able to cash flow with hard money. Did I catch that right?
Yeah, you did.
So you're saying you were able to get a good enough price during the great financial crisis on rental properties. You could buy with hard money, which has high interest rates, and you were still able to cash flow. What do you think about that?
There are bigger houses. There's one neighborhood called Tahoe Park in Sacramento that I found that there's some developer that built like 600 something homes, and they were all 3-1s. And it had this cinder block construction somehow. And what we started doing was just adding, it had this storage shed, and in between it had a covered porch, but no garage. Right.
Okay. So like a breezeway
kind of thing. Yeah.
Yep.
And all we had to do was put 2 walls, and then I don't know. Do you know what Sandy Flow is? Sandy Flow Products.
Yes, I know the name. I can't think what it is.
It's basically the toilets and stuff with a pump. What that allows you to do is put a toilet and a bathroom anywhere, because all you need is a 2-inch pipes.
Huh.
And the thing is, every time you use the sink or whatever, you'll just hear for the pump, the macerator pump that sends everything out and stuff, right? But what that allowed us to do was buy things at like $65,000 and put $15K more into that, and it would be worth like $120K or something right then and there.
Yep. So it was almost like an ADU. Is that fair to say? Like you added square footage just by framing stuff in and adding drywall and a toilet out there?
Pretty much. It was just 2 walls and a door and a bathroom. That's all it was.
See, we couldn't get away with that here because all that would freeze.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm serious.
A whole different construction. We don't know freezing out here. We haven't seen it ever. So that worked really well. And then there were 2 other neighborhoods that had bigger houses, like 5-bedroom, 2 baths, and we were picking that up at like 80-90K.
Wow. In Sacramento?
In Sacramento, yeah.
What
this
year?
was 2009.
Okay. Still surprised.
2009. So it's a whole different time and stuff. Everything, eventually we sold it for like $500,000 plus, But at that point, the money was the issue, right? Like, how are we going to get that? Because nobody was lending on real estate, especially for the down payment or the bottom equity, if you may, The statement that I always make is that till you use your own money, you're shopping. And then when you run out of your own money, that's when you become an investor, because now you have to prove your value to other people.
Yeah. Desperation provides inspiration.
So that's when I kind of went ahead and started talking to people, and, the evangelism, if you may, of our industry. Like, this is awesome. Ignore all the media, anything that you hear on all the media. Look at what's actually happening. Look at the numbers and stuff like that. So
I tell you what, I really didn't learn about hard money until I got into my local REIA and had somebody talking. I still didn't truly understand it. It wasn't until, probably 4 to 5 years into real estate investing, I always get surprised. I'll get chatting with somebody and they just don't understand hard money, how it works, why somebody would lend. They're not getting the background check, not getting a credit check, which, some do, some don't. But for some people, they just can't wrap their head around it. And I personally wish that it was something that I had a deeper understanding of earlier, because I felt like there was a lot more I could have done. I could have started a lot earlier in my career if I really understood how to work it and leverage it to benefit. Because some people just like, 18% interest, no way. But I'm like, no, if you figure it into your cost, it can be really effective.
I had a very good mentor, and I learned how to do hard money lending from him, like how to raise capital and then kind of, lend it out at higher, and the arbitrage, whatever, right? The statement that I make is he was responsible for me moving 3 feet from one side of the lending table to the other side of the lending table. And that was like how to make loans safe. That is a whole different mindset in itself.
Are you still doing lending right now?
No, not anymore. Right now, like not almost all the focus is on the new company, the new venture.
Okay.
One more thing to kind of put a bow on this part of the conversation. So I think what happens sometimes is if you have, let's say, a newer investor or somebody that wants to really kind of ramp up their buying activity and they want to either flip a bunch of houses or they want to acquire more rentals and refinance and get their money out and repeat. I think a lot of times people tune out when they hear somebody say, oh, we were buying, 3, 4, or 5 houses a month, because they're like, well, I can't do that. I don't know how, like I'll never be there. So they just kind of don't hear the message. For somebody that is listening to this, that's like, how can I do that? Do you think hard money is like if you don't have a pile of cash laying around or a gigantic line of credit, is that a good way for people to get started? And I'm not, by the way, I own a hard money lending business, so I'm not back ending into funneling people to that. But
you just did.
Is that how you would approach it if you were starting over?
Pretty much just
No. If you're starting out and deal availability is a problem in where you live, like 90% of all, 92% actually, and this is CoreLogic data, so don't quote me on that, but 92% of all real estate investments happen within 1 hour driving distance of the primary investor's primary location, right? So most of the investors invest close to where they are.
Yeah, makes sense.
Right. But right now, there are over 180 metro areas where it's a dry backyard. Like you have to work really hard to create deals. And that's roughly 105 million US residents.
What do you mean by dry backyard?
Like, okay, somebody in Chicago, if they wanted to do a deal, they will go on MLS today and make 10, 15 offers and probably get one accepted that will cash flow just fine.
Okay, makes sense.
Us guys won't as much. California, Oregon, Washington, Arizona, a lot of places. So there's metro areas that are, so 380 total metro areas in the USA. Out of that 180 metro areas where if you have some capital, that would be much better deployed elsewhere than locally.
Okay, yeah, interesting. All right. So this is actually probably a pretty good segue here into the conversation about long distance investing. Now, your background as a software engineer, real estate investor, it looks like you parlayed that into getting back into the software business. Which were you, by the way, I have to ask, were you kind of like, oh God, I have to dust off my keyboard again, or were you kind of like excited about it?
So here's the thing. There is this one company that got acquired by another company, and then they kind of raised their prices because they had the monopoly on location data. They raised their prices 43 times.
Oh, man.
43 times. All right. So they did that in February of 2023. And I started developing this in April 2023. Because it's like, even with the technology that I was very familiar with 15 odd years back at that point, I knew it was possible and technology had only gotten better. So I basically reached out to my nephew who is in Silicon Valley and said, if we were to make something like this, how would we go around it? And then me, him, and then we started hiring a few engineers here and there, built a team. And it just kind of spiraled out of that because I'm like, there is a market for this because there's all these people that need this, right? So why would and the existing product, it's not for investors. It has a lot of things that is like for homeowners and stuff like that, right? So it's like, if we make something that was for investors by investors, then yeah, that would be pretty freaking awesome. So
Tell us about your product.
The product is called, it's very on the nose, but it's called Where to Invest. But before I go into the product, don't go by zip codes, right? And anytime, like zip code is the primary thing that we go with, right? Like if you wanted to invest, like what is a good zip code in Omaha, or what is a good zip code in Sacramento or whatever? And that's wrong. That's not the way to look for any kind of location data. We already know what it is. It's neighborhoods, right? We are interested in how segments of people behave, which is what leads to things about the property.
This is a great point because the zip code I live in, we have everything from quickly made houses that are like locally they call them like celebrity houses, but everything from like the 275,000 range, and then across the street from me is one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the city, which is there's houses up to 5 to 7 million. If you're looking at it as a whole, you're like, oh man, this area is awesome, but you have a complete mix of completely different home prices.
So the software, it will basically drill even into, so it goes into further than zip code data. So you're saying it pulls neighborhood data that can be really valuable when you're trying to make decisions on how to market, what areas to target, that kind of thing. That's like, who, I guess better asked question would be, who is your customer for this? Is it investors and agents? Is it primarily investors? Like
primarily investors. So there's two. So single family and multifamily. We are only doing long-term homes. We this does not work for short-term Airbnbs, all those things, just simple rentals and stuff. Long-term investors, single family, duplex, triplex, quads, and multifamily. That's what this works for.
Got it. Okay. Is it fair to say that your higher cost of living areas are probably going to be more likely your target customer base?
It could be, but I looked at a few of the Zillow listings in your city, in Omaha, and there are some good duplex, triplex quads out there too that were listed right now. But the main thing for that is there's better areas that if somebody had $100,000 to invest in Omaha, Nebraska, like 40, 50K can be deployed very efficiently, but the other 40, 50K would be better deployed someplace else.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, you see that a lot too. I mean, especially with, places like you're talking about, California, the coastal areas. A lot of people are like, well, I can't get anything to cash flow, so I guess I'm not going to invest. And I would think that this would illuminate a lot of other options that they might have and not maybe thought of on their own. So
right. Yeah. And what that happens is when they look at real estate and then when they look at actually something available and they don't find anything, they're not just looking at, oh, it's real estate. When somebody is ready to invest, they're looking at multiple vehicles. Right. So then they'll put it into a mutual fund or a stock or crypto or whatever else. Everything is trying to go for the same capital. Right. So that's the real challenge. Like if you look at it globally, like from just a capital deployment standpoint, then it's taking capital away from our industry into other things, other vehicles, if you may.
Yeah. No, super interesting. Now, based on all of this research and putting this company together, you've obviously looked at a ton of data. What cities would you absolutely never invest in, and why?
Gary, Indiana is one of them. don't want to go into that. It's because of two things. One is obviously crime. Crime is one of them, but it's also they make it impossibly hard to do any kind of constructions out there on a consistent basis, especially if you're trying to do some sort of value add that shows up on the MLS, right? Shows up on the tax record so that you can kind of, prove to an appraiser and kind of get it back. St. Louis used to be one of them. St. Louis has made a phenomenal comeback in terms of at least crime prevention.
East St. Louis was long known to be like, we really, really want to avoid that area just in general.
Yeah.
We had a guy, David Dodge, in town and spoke at our Ted's local event here. And he's a real active wholesaler in St. Louis, probably one of the biggest ones in Missouri, I think, overall.
I think he was the number one wholesaler, yeah.
Yeah, and he was talking a lot about the local market there, how they operate, and it did sound like it was kind of coming back, rebounding, I guess, from the doldrums that it's been in for a long time.
Right, and it seems like their, I guess, what do you call it, government, municipality, whatever you call it, they have done an active job of clearing out a lot of neighborhoods of a criminal element, which basically brings up the values, right? So if you look at crime, there's two kinds of crimes, right? There's the personal crime and property crime. So the personal crime includes murder, rape, assault, things like that. And then there's property crime, that is burglary, larceny, motor vehicle theft, things like that.
Yep.
So personal crime brings down both property values and rents.
Mhm.
Property crimes generally bring down just rents, not as much property values.
Interesting. I never really thought about it that way. So
Yeah.
basically violent crime versus you're more like theft and domestic violence. Well, I guess domestic violence is violence, but yeah, that's I never really parsed that out into those type of categories. But yeah, I guess you can't really lump all crime into one bucket.
And that's the thing, right? I mean, how are you going to compare a crime? Like, how do you use crime to, like, is there more or less? And that was something that nobody had any idea, because there was just dumping of crime data numbers. But if you're a real estate investor, how do you determine anything in real estate? Show me the comps, right? I mean, how are you going to determine the rents in a particular area? Well, show me the comps. What other, how property values? Show me the comps. Same thing. So what we ended up doing was created this database of all the neighborhoods. And then we tell you where this neighborhood falls in this crime category, as opposed to all the neighborhoods in the USA and all the neighborhoods in the metro area.
Yeah.
And now you can see how it is compared to the rest of the nation and how it is compared to for the locals. And then you can make a decision. And that's the other thing. Like before we started putting the data together and stuff, how do you evaluate a location?
Yep.
And how do you evaluate a location? Like, what do you look at and what do you not look at? One of the things that keeps on being thrown around is just look at the schools, right? You heard that?
Yeah.
If it's good schools and stuff. Population growth, yes. Schools, no. Schools have no impact, because you will see a lot of places where the high school is awesome, like 9 out of 10, but the middle school is like 3 out of 10. And then you will see the grade school is like 5 out of 10. Which school do I consider?
No, that's a good point. Yeah, it's all the same district.
I'm going to average all of them out and do that. So what we found out was that the thinking behind schools is that you think that people pay more property taxes in higher income areas, and then those property taxes go on to pay the teachers and the facilities and stuff like that. And you have good schools out there, right? That's the way it's supposed to function, but it doesn't, because the government bureaucracy comes in there, and sometimes the money doesn't go to schools. A lot of times the money doesn't go to schools. It just goes to a bunch of different things. So income of the people, the individual income and family income, that is the primary characteristic based upon which you gauge so the school is just how the local government is spending the money. That's it. And it could be good. It could be very good. Yeah.
Yeah. I never really thought of it that way, but that does make a lot of sense. And rent or income is going to be a pretty good indicator of what your rent ceiling is going to be in an area. So that'll kind of dictate, like, is this just basically a cash flow play, and it's not going to appreciate much, rents aren't going to go up much, it's just going to be your steady eddy smaller community or whatever. So yeah.
And okay, that also comes down to how much. So let's say it's a neighborhood of 5,000 people, right? And you take a look at like 60% of them or 65% of them are adults, right? The rest of the kids, they're not going to be worried about paying rents or whatever, right? So out of the 65% people, how many of them are making enough that can afford the increased rent?
Yeah, makes sense.
That's what it comes down to. And this is something that I discovered by trial and error. I had a duplex in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Property manager was like, yeah, of course we can increase the rents. And it turns out that I had to do some pretty decent rehab on both the units before I could get the top rents, because only about 8% of the entire neighborhood could actually afford that. And they were demanding a particular kind of product, which I didn't have.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you have to take that into consideration to determine how much CapEx am I going to have to put into a property to make it rentable at the higher levels or the higher tier.
And the higher level in that neighborhood that people can afford. Yeah.
Yeah.
Put together this method called the secrets method to evaluate a location that it always works. If you do that in that order, it always works. So when we started putting together, there was not a methodology for how to evaluate a location for investors to invest. Right? If somebody from Omaha wants to invest in Chicago, how are they going to look at? What are they going to even look at? So we came up with this thing on based upon my previous experience, how to secrets. It's just a nice little acronym. I had to play around that for a while, but size, economic diversity, crime, residence, real estate, equity and cash flow, team building, and swings and trends. And in that order. And
okay. Yeah. That's a mouthful. That's really good though. I mean, that captures, I can't think of any other components that are.
I mean, if everybody had all those categories in their dating profile, relationships would probably go a lot better.
I think they just need to do the hot crazy.
It doesn't matter unless you put it up for to the test, right? So the product is basically 8 screens that you click on, and you are going from one screen or a gate. I call all of them gates to the next gates, right? And the neighborhood as well as the metro area needs to be big enough. Right? Because what happens if you're going into too tiny a metro area, basically what happens is it's open season and you kind of run into this little cartel kind of situation where there's 5 contractors and 2 realtors and stuff. I bought a 12plex in one of those towns in Texas, and essentially they were trying to charge, they red noticed me on changing the sign for the apartment complex was not well lit. And I'm like, yeah, sure. And then they okay, you need to get permit for that. I'm like, okay, I'll send a contractor in there. And the permit fees and everything was $8,000.
For a sign on a 12plex?
Sign, yeah. Wow. So it's okay, it's open season on you. So, you don't go into very tiny towns because it's you don't know what you're going to get. And the second thing is very tiny neighborhoods. There's not enough people in there for you to actually know what's happening, right? So those are the 2 things you want to see. And at the same time, you're going into one of the primary big metro areas. You got to be really careful. Like Chicago, we all know Chicago has fantastic investment neighborhoods in here, but you have to really know which ones they are. The interesting thing is the Chicago metro area has about 9 million people. The state of Illinois has 12 million. So three quarters of the state of Illinois is, I'm sure Omaha has something similar.
Yeah, it's 1 million for Omaha, and then I think the whole state is three something million. So it's a huge chunk of the population between Lincoln and Omaha. It's half the state's population.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, good point on that. Yeah, and super cool product. So where to invest? WTI is the acronym, and you've got basically a filter, or as you call it, gate system that'll kind of drill into specific areas and then specific neighborhoods within the areas to determine, does it hit all of these important factors when you're making an investment choice. I love it, man. It's a great product.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You go through all of them. In residence, you look at whether you have people that can afford your property, that would want to live in it and are long term. And it will also tell you things like how many people in the area, which is a new metric, work from home. Because that's becoming really important, because there are neighborhoods where 30-35% of people work from home. And if you have a 3-bedroom, it's the easiest thing to do is to go ahead and stage one of the bedrooms like an office. It goes really quickly.
Yeah, makes sense.
I've had people that have had apartment complexes that have split their laundry rooms in half and made an office kind of situation out there where they can, the people in the apartments can rent the office to see their clients. And that's working out really well.
Oh, cool. What is the cost of the product, and what's the terms that you got to take on to get it?
Right now, we are at roughly $1,500 for 2,400 reports, which comes down to roughly about 1.8 per report. So every address that you take a look at, right, costs you $1.80. And if you go to the other company, the only other company that is sort of competitor for this it's roughly $22 per report. And that's the first thing. The second thing is, if you wanted to just do market selection and find out what are the best markets for you to invest in, broad terms, there's a quiz that we have created. And the easiest thing is to just take the quiz. Quiz is absolutely free. wheretoinvest.io/cashflowcity.
Okay, we'll get that in the show notes.
Yeah. And what you have is, we'll ask you about what kind of rental yields you're looking for, what kind of deal availability you're looking for, what kind of property values, what's your crime tolerance, and what are your market trends. That's what you're looking for. And it will kind of basically just tell you all about it. And you enter those things and it'll tell you the best cities for you to invest in all over the USA.
Very cool, man. One final question on the software. I assume you know this. Ted and I had a guy on that I happened to meet on Reddit named Bryce Matheson, who is a hard money lender, ex-real estate investor, and he created a hard money lending software product called LENDR Lender. It's really cool, and my business is actually going to start using the software platform here coming up in March. So we're excited about that. But I was talking with him because he's cool, normal guy, and I was just like, why don't you just do hard money? Like, why are you starting software also? Because he had that type of background similar to you. And he's like, because the multiple you can get on exiting a successful software business is crazy. And I'm like, well, what are we talking about here? How do they go about, like, if you got this product launch, you mentioned you did it about 3-4 months ago, say this thing gets mature, you get to a point where you got a whole, big subscription base, or like, it's very profitable. What kind of an exit can you look at for something like this? And how do they go about evaluating what it is? Do they go off of like...
The other company sold for $78 million.
What's that?
The other company sold for $78 million to a bigger conglomerate.
Okay.
Yeah. Changes your mind on your hard money.
So a
now,
little bit better than single family houses in Council Bluffs, Iowa. Got it. Well, that is certainly exciting. Is that the end game for you? Do you want to just like peace out after you sell that and go buy an island somewhere?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. I like it.
Every Silicon Valley company, they kind of like, okay, we just want to be absorbed by somebody else and stuff, So that would be a good thing.
We interviewed a gentleman named Casper Sogard, and he created AI for Amazon and Hulu and other things. And then he created a company called Magic Door, and it's a property management company that also, once it goes national, will eventually have its own system for getting tenants and whatnot. But he's like, yeah, so my wife works, I think it was at like Facebook or something at the time right now. And he's like, yeah, so I've been not working for 2 years now, getting my very nice, 6-figure pay I was getting. And he goes, yep, my wife's okay with it. And now we know that there's a huge end goal, and it's not the memberships.
Right. Yeah.
So that's really interesting. I appreciate you sharing that with us.
I wanted to thank you guys on this. And my job right now, as somebody that has done this, I also own the patent on the method. Of course, literally nobody would give us any money unless you have some sort of IP that cannot be taken away.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing. But pre-revenue, we raised capital for this at a $5 million valuation. That's kind of where it's at.
Interesting. Yeah, that is a whole different world, Silicon Valley. I actually watched it was on Netflix for a little bit. I think maybe Hulu too. Silicon Valley, the series, really funny with TJ Millers and that, like some other nerds that are building a software product and so forth. Super funny and interesting show. Kumail Nanjiani is on there too. I love him.
Kumail's on there, yeah.
Yeah. Well, super cool, man. We've got a section here that we like to ask every guest, and we call it our Failing Forward.
And this Failing Forward is brought to you by Timber Creek Virtual.
At Timber Creek Virtual, we don't just keep your business running. We take it to the next level. Our virtual and executive assistants handle all the everyday tasks so you can focus on what really matters, growing your business. Need clarity on your financial performance? Our expert bookkeeping services keep everything organized, so you always know where your business stands. With our seamless transaction coordination, you never have to worry about the details. Just close the deal. We've got you covered with cutting-edge digital marketing, proactive lead generation, and expert acquisition management. Plus, we handle the cold calling and messaging too. Let us handle the big C part so you can handle your business. Visit timbercreekvirtual.com/services and see how we can make your business soar.
Where we talk about something that happened in life or business, didn't go according to plan, but you maybe learned something along the way. Got anything like that?
Yeah, so I talked about this story. I had like roughly 65% of expenses being met by cash flow at that point. And I needed that one thing, and I was doing ones, and there was an apartment complex that was listed on LoopNet in Henderson, Nevada. And for $180K, that's like less than $4K a unit. And I'm like, how bad could it be? So I put the non-refundable deposit, showed up, and it was, oh my God, not as bad as I expected it to be property-wise, but there were just hookers out there at like 2:00 in the morning with needles. And I'm like, there's not enough money in the world for me to deal with anything like that. So I got into my car, which I was supposed to return in Nevada, and I just drove all the way back to Sacramento thinking, what the heck did I get myself into? And that was the initial failure, was the location. Why did I not know this before going there? I spent the money, time away, the flights, the hotel, all of those things. And I put myself into a pretty bad situation. It's like, why did I not know all these things before? That's what kind of threw me away from remote investing, long distance investing for a while. So
yeah, that's a great example of a failing forward, because you made a decision without all of the information that you would now use, and you learned along the way, and now you've created a software product out of it, and you're going to cash out $79 million. That's great. Well, we have one last section that we ask questions of every guest, and this section is called the OT with Owen and Ted. First question for you is, if you were going to write a book, which we are definitely waiting for, what would the title be and topic?
Oh, the title will be something around the line of location, location, location. How to evaluate a remote location for real estate investors.
Perfect.
How I made my first 100 million.
There you go.
Yeah. Netflix documentary coming soon. Okay, if this is your podcast and you could interview anyone alive in the world today, doesn't have to be real estate related, who would it be? What's the one question you'd like to ask?
Honestly?
Please.
Melania Trump.
Oh, that's a
I would like to talk to her for an hour and just like, come on, sister, tell me what's really up.
Yeah, give me the dirt. Like, what is your life really like? That would be really, really interesting, actually. We get Trump a lot as the answer. This is the very first time we've ever had anybody say Melania, and I think she would actually be probably, of the two of them, more interesting, just because Trump never stops talking.
She'd be a lot.
And she also has she did not grow up in any kind of like, I grew up in the third world, and she is like not third world, but she is like 2.8 world. That's what I call it. And there's places in Eastern Europe that are not quite third, but they're right there in the corner, so.
All right. So we're at the end of the road for the Trivedi crew. Your life is over, unfortunately. Somebody's walking up to the podium to give a eulogy for you. Who do you think it's going to be, and what do you hope they say about you?
One sentence would be, you're the fantastic person to have a beer with and sit and talk with.
Come on, Tapan. I thought that would be an old-fashioned for sure, man.
Old-fashioned. After the third one, something happens and I become all, let me tell you about the time.
Story starts.
This guy was a good father. That's one of the things. This guy was a good comedian. Another thing I hope people say about those things. And yeah, he knows how to party. That's the other thing.
You can give a shout out to any mentor in your life who's had the biggest impact on you and how they influence your personal career or growth.
So two mentors, Reggie Lal in real estate and Ralphie May in stand-up. You guys definitely did a lot for me when I was basically a nobody, and I'm forever grateful for that.
That's great. How can our listeners support you, and what's the best way for them to connect?
Oh, just take the quiz. It's the easiest thing. It takes like 12 questions, like less than 3 minutes to finish. It'll tell you everything that you need to know about which city is the best city to invest in. And that's the easiest way. Or just write to me, Tapan at wheretoinvest.io. And those are the two best ways to connect,
Cool. And
Perfect.
We'll make sure John puts those in the show notes for you.
Yeah.
And the last question I have is, based on how today's interview went, if you could refer one person to be on the podcast, basically, you kind of see how we are, but generally we have an old
Bruce Norris, if you can get him, he's phenomenal.
Okay.
He has done all the work on the market cycles and the kind of deals that work really well in those market cycles and stuff. And that's the eye-opening thing for me, was that when the market cycle changes, if you're playing the game, you got to have all new cards, because that deal that was working is not working anymore, and something else is in its place.
I wrote his name down when you initially mentioned it. So yeah, that'd be awesome to get him on. That's a topic I'm super interested in.
Tapan, thank you for you and your team to reaching out. It was great to get to know you. I love talking to other REIA owners and kind of picking their brain, getting some ideas on how to make things better, how to grow, how to exit. So I appreciate all your insight on that. So I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. This just felt like a chat, This was really nice.
Or and next time we'll make sure we have it over an old fashioned. But if you make it to the Omaha area where we live, please let us know that you're traveling through so we can get together.
Well, I noticed the gates that you have don't include temperatures during the winter, so I think Omaha might still be on that list.
Yeah, I don't do cold well, but I guess you guys do have summers there, so there's that.
But with that, Owen Dashner, we sign us off.
On behalf of REIA Radio, Aiden Bear and Ted Kosh, I'm Owen Dashner. You've been listening to Tapan, Zip Codes Are for Losers, Trivedi.
Thank you so much, sir.
This episode is also brought to you by PropStream and Magic Door.
All right, fire away.
Well, the countdown was still happening,
Oh,
so
sorry.
I couldn't do it yet.
Ted's kind of a diva.
Oh, wait. The timer hasn't started yet either. Until he says started. That's like when we know he's ready. Jeez, you're so impatient with your age. Hit 50 and you think you just gotta go. Is it because you feel like your life is coming closer to an end?
Countdown's on, buddy.
Okay,
Gotta make the most of it.
All right, Tapan's like, what the hell did I get involved with here?